Okay, let's jump right in. We're doing a deep dive today into something that sounds, well, almost like something out of an adventure movie. An ancient prediction, seemingly impossible, that apparently came true centuries later.
Yeah, it's quite a story. We're talking about the Quran and its specific claim about Pharaoh's body being preserved.
Right, the Pharaoh from the time of Moses. And what's so fascinating, or maybe confusing at first, is the whole drowning part.
Exactly. The story, both historically and in religious texts, is that Pharaoh drowned chasing the Israelites across the Red Sea.
So, how do you preserve a body that drowned? It feels like a contradiction.
It does on the surface, but then you look at the Quran, Surah Yunus, verse 92. It's very specific.
What does it say exactly?
It says, so today we will save you in your body, Jasad, that you may be a sign for those after you. And it adds, and indeed many among mankind are heedless of our signs.
Save you in your body. That word jasad, meaning the physical body. That's pretty explicit, isn't it?
Very, not just like memory or spirit, but the actual physical form.
And this is where history takes an unexpected turn.
With the archaeology. In 1898, they actually discovered a pharaoh's mummy.
And not just any pharaoh.
No, one widely believed to be the pharaoh from that specific period, the Exodus. Ramses II is often the candidate discussed.
So the really big claim here, is that this verse, revealed way back, centuries before 1898.
Actually predicted that this specific body would be found, preserved.
It's almost like finding an ancient newspaper headline that perfectly matches a modern scientific report. Pretty wild.
It is. And to understand it, we need to look at that word save. The Arabic nunojika.
Right, you said it wasn't about, like, spiritual salvation.
Correct. In this context, scholars argue it means preservation, to preserve the body as a sign, as physical evidence for people later on.
Okay, so preserving the remains as a sign, not rescuing him from the act of drowning itself.
Precisely. And this is where the science gets, well, really interesting. When they examined the mummy, they found evidence consistent with, signs of saltwater exposure, erosion, things that strongly suggest immersion in salt water.
Which lines up perfectly with the Red Sea account.
It provides corroborating evidence, yes. Now think about a body drowned, then somehow preserved for thousands of years. That's highly unlikely under normal circumstances.
Extremely unlikely. So how did it happen? Was it just luck, a coincidence, or something else?
Well, there seem to be a few factors, maybe a convergence of factors. First, the Red Sea itself.
How does that help?
It's very salty. High salinity inhibits bacterial growth. So the very medium of his death might have, ironically, started a preservation process, slowing down decomposition right away.
Okay, so the salt water helps initially. What else?
Then there's neutron, that salt mixture the ancient Egyptians were masters at using for mummification.
Right, to dry out the body.
Exactly. And what's noted about the mummy often identified as this pharaoh, Ramses II, is the presence of significant amounts of natron, maybe even unusually high amounts.
More than usual for mummification.
Potentially. Some analyses suggest that. It adds another layer to the preservation puzzle.
And then there's just Egypt itself.
Right. The climate. Extremely dry, very arid. That environment is naturally fantastic for preserving organic material over long, long periods.
So you've got the salt water, maybe extra natron, and this super dry climate. Like a perfect storm for preservation.
It does seem like a unique combination of circumstances. Which brings us to someone like Maurice Bucaille.
The French scientist.
Yes, a surgeon initially. He studied the mummy and famously commented on this Quranic verse. He found it remarkable that the Quran mentioned the body's preservation centuries before science could, confirm the mummy's existence or study it.
His perspective, coming from medicine, adds a certain weight, doesn't it?
It certainly made people take notice. He argued that the knowledge in the Quran seemed to predate the scientific capabilities of the time it was revealed.
The verse calls Pharaoh's preserved body a sign. How does that play out today? I mean, the mummy exists, it's been studied.
Well, think about where it ends up. This mummy, Ramses II, is a global artifact. It's been displayed in major museums around the world.
Right. Often in exhibits about ancient Egypt, sometimes even touching on the Exodus story.
Exactly. So even in secular museum settings, his actual preserved body serves as this tangible link back to that specific historical and religious narrative. Is that part of the sign, the global spectacle?
It's a powerful thought. The irony is pretty thick, too, isn't it? A tyrant who wanted absolute power and, maybe godlike status
Ends up preserved and displayed as essentially a museum exhibit, a historical artifact.
Why preserve a tyrant, though? Like, from the perspective of the verse, what's the purpose?
Well, there are a couple of main interpretations that come up. One is about demonstrating divine power. Pharaoh's arrogance, his desire for immortality on his own terms,
Yeah.
is contrasted with this outcome. He is preserved, but not in the glorious way he likely envisioned. Instead, it's seen as a humbling, a testament that human power has limits before the divine.
So, like a lesson in humility written in history and, well, mummified flesh.
Sort of, yeah. And the other interpretation ties directly back to the verse's wording. A sign for those after you.
For later generations.
Exactly. It's tangible proof. Something people centuries later can actually see, study, and reflect upon. It moves the story from just text to something physical, something you can, well, almost confront.
You mentioned Maurice Bucay's examination earlier.
Yeah.
His personal story connected to this is quite famous too, right?
It is. In 1975, he was part of the French team examining the mummy. He personally identified salt remnants, which reinforced the drowning hypothesis for him.
So the science came first for him, in a way.
It seems so. Finding that physical evidence prompted him to look into what different scriptures said about Pharaoh's end.
And that's when he encountered the Quranic verse.
Yes, and reading Quran 10.92, with its specific mention of saving the body as a sign, well, it apparently struck him very deeply.
How so?
He's quoted as saying, essentially, that from a scientific viewpoint, it seemed impossible for someone writing in the 7th century to know that this specific pharaoh's body would be recovered and found in a preserved state.
Wow. And that led to his conversion.
It's widely reported as a major factor in his decision to embrace Islam. The perceived scientific impossibility of that knowledge originating from a human source at that time.
Okay, so bringing this all forward, why talk about this now? What's the relevance for us today, in the 21st century?
Well, it touches on big questions about faith, history, and evidence. For some believers, this story is presented as sort of empirical proof.
Proof of the Quran's divine origin?
That's how it's often framed, yes. A specific, verifiable prediction seemingly fulfilled centuries later. It's used as an argument against purely materialistic views, suggesting something beyond conventional explanation.
A convergence of scripture and scientific finding.
And then there's the theme of maybe divine justice. Pharaoh as the symbol of ultimate power and oppression. His preserved state serves as this constant reminder. Even the most powerful aren't beyond accountability, becoming, in the end, objects of study, perhaps even cautionary tales. Their legacy, even their physical body, tells a story.
And I suppose, practically speaking, it's used in conversations about faith.
Definitely. For people sharing your faith, particularly with skeptics, it's offered as a concrete example, something tangible that seems to connect ancient text with modern discovery, a starting point for discussion.
It feels like it ties into another verse too, doesn't it? The one about signs.
Absolutely. You're likely thinking of Surah Fusilat, verse 53.
Remind me.
It says, "We will show them our signs in the horizons and within themselves until it becomes clear to them that it is the truth."
Signs in the horizons and within themselves. How does Pharaoh fit?
Well, you could see Pharaoh's body, this historical artifact discovered across time, as a sign in the horizons, an external historical piece of evidence. And perhaps the story, the themes of arrogance, power, consequence, that resonates as a sign within themselves, prompting reflection on human nature.
So, wrapping up this deep dive, it really leaves you thinking, doesn't it? This blend of ancient text, a specific prediction, a dramatic historical event, and then a modern archaeological discovery.
It definitely challenges you to think about how history, science, and faith can intersect.
Yeah, how does this whole narrative, this preserved body claimed as a sign, make you reconsider the nature of evidence itself and maybe how we understand the past? Definitely food for thought.